Bill Ford, welcome to Riyadh. Thank you so much for joining me on Al Arabiya. I want to kick off by asking you about your new ventures in the Middle East.
Well, first, Hadley, thank you for having me here. It's great to be back in Riyadh, here for the FII. But earlier this week, we announced the opening of our office here in Saudi Arabia. We've been active in the region for about 10 years, but now we'll have a team on the ground looking for investments throughout the whole GCC.
Tell me about what you see as the most exciting part about how Saudi Arabia is performing today.
Well, really building on the last 8 years of Vision 2030, there's been an entrepreneurial ecosystem that's begun to take hold. That's extremely exciting. And just a couple of quick notes. 5 years ago, Saudi venture capital was $150 million per year. Today, it's $1.4 billion per year. So the venture ecosystem has started. And something that's even more exciting is a lot of young Saudis who went abroad to be educated or maybe to work are coming back here to go into the private sector and either start companies or join early stage companies. So it is all the makings of a very exciting entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Usually there's this big narrative that people from the West come to Saudi Arabia, they're looking for investors, they're looking for cash, but you're putting business into this part of the world.
Yeah, it's a real shift. I mean, we've had some great investors from Saudi Arabia for the last 20 years and the GCC, and they've been an important part of our program. But what's really exciting now is that the amount of opportunities to invest in the GCC and in Saudi Arabia have increased significantly. And so this team on the ground is a full-fledged investment team. We incubated them in London, but now they're moving here and they look for investments in the region.
What do you say to the narrative in the West that Saudi Arabia is running out of time and running out of cash?
Well, they better get over here and visit and see the energy and the dynamism.
Yeah. But you're not worried by the borrowing?
No, I'm not really, because I think the private sector economy is growing 4% plus. I think that's going to carry the region. And again, the sense of entrepreneurship and new company creation is so exciting right now.
Yeah.
I actually think they'll be fine.
Talk me through how you see the macro picture. If you were going to invest in anything right now, what would it be?
Well, one of the most exciting things going on here in Saudi is the whole Fintech explosion.
Yeah.
They've always had some great financial institutions, but the amount of innovation in financial services is really on par with what we're seeing in other parts of the world. And that's really exciting. So I think Fintech will be a major focus. The consumer markets, it's a very well-developed consumer market. B2C internet companies are really working here.
Yeah.
And so I think those two areas in particular will be exciting.
What are the things that you're worried about in the short to medium term? Are we talking about the presidential election? What's happening with China?
Well, the two big events here for the second half of 2024 have really been the interest rate cycle, which appears to have turned in most of the Western world and most parts of the world. That's good news. And the second is waiting on the U.S. election. I think once we clear those two major issues or major events, I think you'll see a lot more deal making happen, because again, people were on the sidelines to some extent waiting for those two things to happen.
If you were going to make a bet, would it be, the bombastic Trump or the verbally incontinent Kamala Harris? Who's going to win?
I don't know, but I do think, President Trump, if he does win, would be very good for business. Not just in the United States, but I think here in the Middle East. I think he's always had a pro-business agenda. He believes in the private sector, and I think those two factors will really, unleash a lot of energy that's been pent up for the last 4 years.
Yeah, speaking of energy, the conversations that I've been having with energy ministers over the last year or so have been about AI and how much energy that's going to actually need, and that the world is not, in fact, prepared for that. What does it say to you that countries like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, are making such big investments in AI simply because they're going to be able to fund that energy need?
I think that the Middle East is incredibly well positioned to capitalize on what's going to happen in AI. It has two of the things that are absolutely essential to make AI work. One, as you said, Hadley, is power. Yeah. Well, the second is capital. This is, unlike the internet cycle, this is a very capital intensive business to build AI. The data center needs, the compute power, the chips that are required, all that requires capital. So the GCC in Saudi, with those two assets on their side, again, are very well positioned to be a global player in AI.
Who do you think is going to be left behind?
I'm worried about Europe. I'm worried about the economic dynamism in Europe. I'm worried about their energy security. I'm worried about their level of government intervention into the private sector and what that means long term. And they're competing in a world where you have China, you've got regions like the Middle East that are forward looking and pro-business. You've got the U.S., which continues to plow ahead at 3% kind of growth rates with a lot of dynamism. And I think they're going to have to really get their act together if they want to compete.
Bill, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for joining Al
Thank you,
Arabiya.
Hadley. Thank you.